I don't know why it's taken me this long to do this discussion, because I've been obsessing over Full House for about 2 years now, almost 2 years. Obviously, that's not as long as some people, considering the pilot aired in 1987, but I discovered it a couple of years ago, and I only really started watching it because I'm a diehard Mary-Kate and Ashley fan, and I'd always meant to get around to watching it, and once I did, I was hooked. I could not stop watching it, and I've decided to revisit the pilot a couple of times, both the aired and the unaired, which I will talk about in a moment. But I just thought, I'm really in a Full House mood. I really want to talk about it. I don't really know that many people in my personal life who are big Full House fans. This seems like the perfect opportunity for me to just gush about how much I love it. And specifically with focus on the first episode, because the first episode is a little bit special, and there are a lot of things about this that I think work really, really well. There is one thing though that I think was a really odd choice, because it doesn't fit in with the rest of the show, which I will discuss. But with regards to the unaired pilot, I didn't watch the unaired pilot until I'd watched the entire show. Primarily because I didn't know it was a thing until I'd finished watching all of the seasons. But the unaired pilot is almost identical to the aired pilot, by which I mean even, Candace Cameron and Jodie Sweetin, both of whom were 10 and 5 at the time, they're on their markers. They're exactly where they need to be. If you compare the two frames, or the frames from each scene side by side, they hit their markers, their reactions are the same, and that seems, obviously that's what actors do, but for being so young, they just had everything down to a T, and it was absolutely fantastic to kind of compare the two after the fact, and particularly with Stephanie, Jodie Sweetin's character, when she's interacting with Jesse, played by John Stamos. And that's just something that I absolutely adore. I also think the outfit choice for Stephanie in this first episode was perfect. It's adorable. The curly hair is gorgeous. Apparently Jodie Sweetin doesn't actually have, or didn't have, naturally curly hair. She had to have rollers in every night, which for a 5-year-old must have been an absolute nightmare. But I think they got that absolutely spot on. DJ, being 10, is kind of in that in-between situation where she's not a young and carefree child. I say carefree, obviously the show centres around a family who has recently lost their mother. But with her being not quite a young little girl, but also not quite a moody teenager, I don't think we get to know her very much in this first episode, because it means that her character is a little bit more complicated. Stephanie completely fills the cute, young, adorable little girl. DJ takes more than the first episode to kind of get to know who she is, what her likes and interests are. But it's still a really interesting introduction to the character, and I think it is pretty obvious that she's the oldest child. I think that is something that comes across quite well. And obviously Michelle is ridiculously adorable. I still think it's really weird that they credited her as Mary-Kate Ashley Olsen, trying to trick the audience into thinking that this baby was played by one child. I'm not sure what the point in that was. Everybody knows that twins play young children until they're, a good couple of years old. But she's absolutely adorable. Michelle is ridiculously cute. Obviously in this first episode she doesn't do much, but there is a lovely scene with her. One of my favourite scenes that actually rears its head again in Fuller House regarding the Flintstones. And you'll know exactly which moment I mean if you've seen the episode, which I'm assuming you have. And I just love it. It's a really sweet introduction to Michelle. We don't get to know too much about her. To be fair, there's not that much to know about her at this age. Then the adults. This is the interesting thing. So primarily we have, of course, Jesse, and Jesse being Danny's brother-in-law. He is a bit of a cool dude, and I'll be honest, I wasn't sure that I would take to him very well. He seemed a little bit full of himself in this first episode. But interestingly, even though he seems more and more vain as the show progresses, he becomes more and more lovable, and Jesse is actually, by the time we get to the end of the show, and certainly as we progress into Fuller House, Jesse actually became one of my favourite characters. So my initial impressions here were completely different to how I ended up feeling about Jesse. John Stamos, absolutely incredible. With the room with the bunnies and his reactions to things, the way he interacts with Stephanie. I love, he absolutely fantastic. Joey Gladstone, played of course by Dave Coulier, is just brilliant. It was very obvious very quickly that he was going to be the comedic element. There's a lot about his character that reminds me of Robin Williams. Maybe Dave Coulier as well. I don't know exactly how much of Coulier's personality was fed into this character, but certainly the character of Joey Gladstone reminds me of Robin Williams, and whenever he does voices, it makes me smile. Obviously that's more as you go into the show, but I feel like we very quickly were able to ascertain what this character's role would be in this family unit. And then the interesting one, Danny Tanner. And in the unaired pilot, of course, it's not Bob Saget. Bob Saget plays Danny Tanner for the entire show, and he is amazing. He is the perfect combination of slightly uptight, but also doesn't have everything together. Of course he doesn't have everything together. That's why Jesse and Joey are there in the house, because he's a newly single father, still really grieving for his wife. He has a job. He wants everything to be right for his girls, and obviously, strict bedtimes, not too much sugar. But at the same time, he's not perfect. He's a perfectionist, but he's not perfect. And I love this character, and I think he's kind of a really nice middle ground between Joey's comedic, carefree attitude and Jesse's almost standoffish attitude, because he's quite young still, and he wants to go out and have fun and, be a lad, I guess. Terrible phrase, but I think he's a really great middle ground, and I really like, Bob Saget's perfect for this. Now, apparently Bob Saget was basically tied to the show, but not available for filming the original pilot, and that's why John Posey stepped in. And I have to say, although it's unusual and a little uncomfortable to see John Posey, or just to see anybody playing this role that isn't Bob Saget, I think it would work if Bob Saget were unable to commit to the show and John Posey was kept on as Danny Tanner. I could see it working. I really could. I think that also the theme tune with performed by Jesse Frederick, Everywhere You Look, it's just amazing. The Fuller House version's alright, but the original from Full House, I love the intro titles. I think it's one of the reasons that got me really hooked straight away, because it's really catchy and really engaging. So the unaired pilot is great and absolutely worth a watch, but I'd say wait until you watch the entire show, because then you will have a lot more emotions to draw upon and a much greater understanding of who the characters are and what they become, and it's nice to just go back and reflect. The pilot, the first episode, the introduction to Full House, I adored. I thought it was fantastic. It hooked me in immediately and sparked what I assume will be a lifelong love of a show that I had been meaning to watch for a very long time. Try as I might, I cannot fault it. I absolutely love it.